Hi, my dear children. Many of our previous classes we have studied about ancient civilizations of India like Harappan civilization and Vedic civilization. In this session, we are going to learn about ancient civilizations of the world. In this chapter, ancient civilizations of the world, we learn the great civilizations of the world, Egypt, Mesopotamia and China, art, architecture and lifestyle of different civilizations. Generally, all the civilizations of the world originated on the bank of rivers. We find Indus Valley civilization originated on the bank of Indus River. Many other civilizations flourished in various parts of the world at the time of Indus Valley civilization. We can see the Egyptian civilization, Mesopotamian civilization, and Chinese civilization in Asia and Africa. The Egyptian civilization. The civilization that was discovered on the banks of River Nile in Egypt is one of the oldest civilization in the world. It is a civilization which flourished over more than 3000 years. The great historian Herodotus called Egypt the gift of the river Nile. The longest river in the world, Nile, flows from the south to the north of African continent. The Egypt occupy the northern part of the great river. The Stone Age people lived in these regions. The people of these regions took animal husbandry and depended on agriculture. The flat, fertile land was used for agriculture and they cultivated crops like flax and wheat. With the industrialization, the villages grew into towns. The river Nile facilitated transport by boats and ships. Hence, Egypt is known as the gift of river Nile. Every rainy season, the Nile River would transform the Nile Valley into a huge lake. After the valley dried up in summer, a fertile layer of clay soil would form the grazing field and neighboring agricultural lands. The work that would need the labors of hundreds of people was being done by the kind river all alone. This fertile land provided food for the population of the first town in this area. Not all agricultural regions were in the valley. Hence, through small canals and wells, they were responsible for the development of a complex system of irrigation throughout the land. The prosperous and wealthy Egyptian peasants and citizens during their leisure time engaged themselves in the creation of artistic works. The Egyptian king was called Pharaoh. He was supposed to be the priest with divine power. The role of the priest was created to interpret nature and explain it. The priests were scholars and shouldered the responsibility of protecting written documents. The most famous rulers of this period are Amonhotep, Tutankhamun, Amosis.
When Howard Carter's team opened the tomb in November 1922, they discovered a wealth of treasures and gifts the king would need in the afterlife. 6 disassembled golden chariots, his throne, and provisions of food and wine. Concealed behind a false wall was a stone sarcophagus protecting a gold-plated coffin. Inside it, 2 more coffins, the innermost made of solid gold and covered in gemstones. And inside that, the mummy of Tutankhamun, wearing a magnificent death mask.
The Egyptians worshipped many gods and goddesses. The sun god was the most popular god, and he was called the Ra. River Nile was the main goddess. They worshipped many animal forms. The Egyptians, from the early time itself, believed in life after death. Their beliefs was that the soul after the death would visit the god of death called Osiris, and then would enter the dead body again. The Egyptians believed that man had to give an account of his deeds on the earth to Osiris, the god of life and death. The priest considered that life on the earth was temporary and was needed only to prepare for the next life. Thus, the wall of the Nile Valley was reserved for the dead. The dead body would be smeared with various chemicals and wrapped with a thin cloth. The entire body was in this way preserved. The body protected, thus was called a mummy. It would be kept in a specially designed coffin. The grave was considered the true place for an Egyptian. Hence, all around the dead body items needed for daily use and small dolls of a cook and barber would be kept to fulfill all future needs.
This is a mummy of a young man named Heraclides. He died in Egypt in the 1st century AD when he was about 20 years old. Mummification was developed by the ancient Egyptians to preserve the body for the afterlife. Typically, all internal organs were removed before mummification, with the exception of the heart. But in this case, the heart was removed and the lungs were left intact. Next, the body was covered with salt and left for about 40 days, until all moisture was eliminated. Perfumed oils and plant resins were rubbed on the body. Thick layers of resin were applied to glue the strips of linen that were wrapped around the body. The mummy was placed on a wooden board, and more wrappings bound them together. A mysterious pouch, perhaps of religious significance, was placed on the chest. A mummified ibis, a wading bird with a slender, down-curved bill, was placed on the abdomen. Ibis mummies commonly served as votive offerings to the gods, but this is an unusual case of a bird being mummified with a deceased human. Long linen strips further secured the wrappings. A portrait panel of Heraclides was placed over the face. A large linen cloth was wrapped around the mummy. The shroud was painted red with an imported lead-based pigment. This treatment is rare. Very few red shroud mummies are known to exist. Egyptian symbols of protection and rebirth were painted on the outer cloth with pigments and gold. Finally, Heraclides' name was written in Greek at the feet. Thanks to this remarkable mummification process, Heraclides' body is with us today.
The Egyptian artists were men of great achievements. Huge images of kings carved on hard rocks are praiseworthy. From the temple at Karnak till the river Nile, there were rows of figures of Sphinx. The Sphinx has the head of a man and body of a lion. The Egyptians, in the beginning, constructed graves by carving into the rocks in the hills. As they moved towards north, the Egyptians had to construct graves in the desert itself. Tall towers were built on these graves using huge blocks of stones in order to protect the eternal sleep of the dead. Kings and wealthy people competed each other to build taller and taller towers. The Greeks called these structures pyramids. In these pyramids, the Egyptians have shown extraordinary skills. The pyramid at Giza is 481 feet in height and its base is a square of 746 feet. It occupies 13 acres and took 20 years to complete its work. It was built by Pharaoh Khufu. The kings of Egypt were called pharaohs. Pharaoh means a person who lives in a palatial house. The ancient Egyptians introduced the first postal system in the world. They prepared papers to write from a tall hollow reed called papyrus that grew on the banks of Nile River. Prepared papyrus plant was used for writing with ink made of herbal juice. This papyrus gave us the modern word paper. Their writings was called hieroglyphics. It was a symbolic language, consists of small drawings and has been called hieroglyphics. That means sacred writings. They produced a variety of cosmetics and evolved a solar calendar. The sundial, invented by the Egyptians, help us to measure time. They made commendable progress in navigation, geometry, astronomy, and medical science. In the course of 3000 years, around 30 dynasties ruled over Egypt. After an independent, prosperous life for 20 centuries, Egypt was ruled over by an Arabian shepherd tribe called Hyksos. Hyksos attacked Egypt, and after defeating Egypt, they ruled for 500 years. The Hyksos looted the wealth of native people of Egypt and hence did not become popular in Egypt. The Jewish people who came wandering through the desert in search of shelter were also hated by the people of Egypt. By cooperating with the foreign rule, the Jews even assisted them in collecting tax and in administration. In 1700 BC, the people of Thebes rose in revolt against the foreigners. After a prolonged conflict, Thebes succeeded in driving Hyksos out of their country. Egypt became free once again. After 1,000 years, it came under the rule of Sardanapals of Assyria. The Persian emperor Cambyses occupied Egypt in the 6th century BC. The Macedonian king Alexander occupied Persia in the 4th century BC. After that, Egypt became a province of Macedonia. One of the Alexander's military general declared himself the king of Egypt and established a dynasty of the Ptolemy. He founded the city of Alexandria. In 39 BC, the Romans came to Egypt. The last Egyptian queen, Cleopatra, tried her level best to save the country from the Romans. It was said that the Romans feared the beauty of Cleopatra more than her troops. Twice, she was successful in her attack on the heads of Roman conqueror. However, in 30 BC, Augustus Caesar, the son-in-law of Julius Caesar, defeated Cleopatra and conquered Egypt. When Augustus Caesar planned to carry Cleopatra away along with the other spoils of the battles, Cleopatra consumed poison and ended her life. From then onwards, Egypt became a province of Roman Empire.